All right, here we go. All right, okay. We are now streaming live on Facebook. All right, I'm Brother Doug with my brother Joshua, our sister Josie, our sister Sally, and our brother Dennis. We are the Awakened by Yahuwah Fellowship Assembly and Yahuwah Almighty Yahushua Messiah. So tonight we're going to do a brief little study that I actually wanted to do for a while. It's called Differences in the Book of Hosea. And so I'm just going to be going through some cross references here. All right. Just get everyone's name on here. Okay. All right. So here we go. So let me get the shared screen on here. We're going to go through some of these here. And all right. So I believe we should be able to just switch to here. Okay. Differences in the book of Hosea. Okay, so we're first going to go to Hosea chapter 1, verse 6. And the Septuagint says, set myself in array against them, meaning his people, Yasharal, Israel. Masoretic says, I will utterly take them away. So, and if we look at some context here, okay, so Hosea chapter 1, verse 6. And let me just make sure I'm on the right verse here. Yeah, 1 verse 6. Okay, and probably gonna have to restart the shared screen here just to make sure this is working. Okay. All right, it says, and she conceived again and bore a daughter, and he said to them, call her name Unpitied, for I will no more have mercy on the house of Israel, but will surely set myself in array against them. So this is clearly a warning. And I'm sorry, everyone, if my camera's not fully showing my face here. Sorry about that. All right, so we see here that the Septuagint is making it very obvious Yahuwah is against his own people. Now, if we go to a Masoretic version, it would say, um, call her name Lo Ruama. So the Masoretic uses a transliteration there instead of actual giving you the meaning of that name, which means unpitied. For no longer do I have compassion on the house of Yasharal, so as to forgive them at all. So that's interesting. It's very interesting. There's no mention of setting himself against them or even removing them. That's interesting. So it seems like possibly that might have been omitted there, if I'm reading that correctly. So now we're going to move on. We're going to move on to verses, uh, let's see, verse 8 here. And we just talked about the difference between unpitied. They use the meaning in the Septuagint, unpitied, versus the Masoretic text using the transliteration of Lo Ruama. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go to eastward again. We're going to go to verse 8 here of chapter 1. All right. So now let's move down to verse 8 here. Okay. So she weaned Lo Ruama. Okay, and then we go to the Bretons here, English Septuagint. And she weaned unpitied, and she conceived again and bore a son. Okay, so self-explanatory there. All right, so we're going to move on to the next bullet point I have here. All right. Chapter 1, verse 9. Not my people. And I should probably highlight this. Okay. Septuagint here says, not my people for verse 9. So we're going to go to verse 9 here. Okay. Verse 9. And he said, call his name not my people, for you are not my people, and I am not your Alua. I am not your Elohim. So we go to see if there's any difference here in the Masoretic. Yes, so call his name Loami. So The Septuagint's a little bit more clear about why they're not his people, why he names that child Lo Ami. This is supposed to symbolize at this point that Israel, there is a cutting off of the house of Israel, the divorce. Okay, so Hosea chapter 2, verse 1 says pitied for the Septuagint, and Masoretic text, Ruama. Okay. All right, let's see here. Yeah, so Hosea 2, verse 1. Okay, let me see here. So 2, verse 1. So say to your brother, my people, and to your sister, pity. Says the Septuagint. Say, and the Masoretic says, say unto your brother, Ami, and to your sisters. So interesting. The Septuagint has singular for sister. Masoretic has plural for sisters, and Ruama instead of pitied. So that's interesting. Okay. All right. So we're going to continue here. All right. We're going to go to verse 8 of chapter 2 now, which the Masoretic text is now lacking images, referring to the idols of Israel here. Okay, so for some reason, it's lacking the word images. Okay, so let's see, just to make this a little easier here. Okay. All right. For she did not know that I gave her grain and wine and oil, and multiplied her silver and gold, she prepared for Baal. Okay. Now, where did I misquote this on the document? I must have misquoted this. Okay, because it's supposed to be here. Yeah, very strange. Okay. Anyway, all right, maybe I got to make a little change to that. All right. So, okay, let's go to verse 9. I apologize for that, everyone. There's no difference, I guess, in verse 8 there. All right. So let's see, verse 9. Therefore, I will return and take away my grain in time thereof, and my wine in the season thereof, and I will recover my wool, my flax given to cover her nakedness. Now, what's interesting here is that the Masoretic is saying he's going to cover her nakedness with the flax and the wool. It actually says here in the Septuagint, it says, so that she shall not cover her nakedness. Pretty interesting. Two completely different opposite paradigms there. So that's kind of interesting. The Masoretic text would have you believe that Yahuwah is going to immediately have mercy on her again, versus the Septuagint is showing that Yahuwah is still angry at his people. So that's interesting. All right, so let's see here. Shall not. Verse 12 here. And the birds of the sky and the reptiles of the earth, the Septuagint says. So now we're going to look at chapter 2, verse 12 of Hosea. So we're doing, for people that just joined, we're doing differences in the book of Hosea. So chapter 2, verse 12, I'm going to drop down here. And, okay, so here we go. I will utterly destroy her vines and her fig trees, all things of which she said, these are my hire, which my lovers have given me, and I will make them a witness, and the wild beasts of the field, and the birds of the sky. So what's interesting about the Masoretic here is towards the end of the verse here, the Masoretic is actually missing birds of the sky, reptiles of the earth shall devour them. So that's kind of interesting that would be missing. That's pretty interesting to me. So anyway, moving on here. Okay. Hosea chapter 2, verse 23. The Masoretic text, not surprisingly, has omitted Yahuwah here in Hosea chapter 2, verse 23. So we're going to go to that next. Let's go to the eastward here. This is chapter 2, verse 23. Let's drop down here. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Oops. It's a little too far. Here we go. Chapter 2, verse 23. And I will sow her unto me in the earth, and I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy. And I will say to them, which are not my people, you are my people. And they shall say, you are my Elohim. What's interesting here is it just says, you are my Elohim, but in the Septuagint it would say, you are Yahuwah, my Elohim. Very interesting. So something to keep a note of there, that the Tetragrammaton is completely omitted in the Masoretic in that verse. Okay, let's see here. Chapter 3, verse 2 we're up to right now. Okay, Masoretic text lacks flask of wine. Okay, all right. So chapter 3, verse 2. And let's see here. Right. I'm going to put my earbuds in too. All right, just in case there's no background noise. All right, so chapter 3, verse 2. Here we go. So I hired her to myself for 15 pieces of silver and a homer of barley and a flagon of wine. So the wine is not mentioned. The flagon of wine is not mentioned at all in the Masoretic there. Very interesting. Okay. So we're going to move on here. Chapter 4, verse 6. Okay. All right. So this is a pretty interesting one. Most of us know the traditional rendering, the Masoretic rendering of this, that it's interpreted that Yahuwah is trying to warn us about those that are unwillfully ignorant, that he is rejecting his people because they do not know his word, or and it seems to be unwillful ignorance, but we're going to see the difference here in the Septuagint of Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. Okay, it says, and the Masoretic says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge because you have rejected knowledge. Okay, so even the Masoretic, you can kind of get an idea of willful ignorance here. I will also reject you, that you shall be no priest to me, seeing that you have forgotten the law of your Elohim. I will also forget your children. Now, we go to the Septuagint. It makes it very clear this is willful ignorance and not unwillful ignorance. My people are like as if they had no knowledge, meaning like they're acting as if they don't know my word. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you, that you shall not minister as priest to me. And as you have forgotten the law of your Elohim, I also will forget your children. So the main difference there, instead of my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, it says my people are as if they had no knowledge, meaning they do actually have knowledge of his word, but they don't use it. So, all right. So verse 7, for dishonor I will appoint. So the Septuagint has this phrase here in chapter 4, verse 7. According to their multitude, so they sinned against me. I will turn their esteem into shame. Huh. Okay, what's going on Why? So they sinned against me. Right. Hold on. For dishonor I will appoint. I wonder where I got that. Did I use the Apostolic Bible Polyglot or something? I don't see that at all. Hold on a second. All right, let me just see here. According to their multitude, so they have sinned against me. Their esteem for dishonor I will appoint. Okay. Okay, yeah, it's the Apostolic Bible Polyglot. Okay. So that's where I got that note from, that little bullet point from. Okay, so according to the Apostolic Bible Polyglot, the Masoretic is missing the phrase "I will appoint." For dishonor, I will appoint. Okay. Let's see here. So verse 8 shall take their lives. Okay, so we're looking at verse 8 now in the Septuagint of chapter 4. Okay, so let me just go there real quick. All right. So the sins of my people they shall eat, and in their lawlessnesses shall take their lives. So it seems like this is talking about Yahuwah sending a nation to consume Israel for their lawlessnesses, and that seems to be the context of what the Septuagint is talking about here. The sins of they shall eat the sins of my people, and in their lawlessness shall they take their lives. So the phrase shall take their lives is not in the Masoretic, as we see there. So, okay. All right. Chapter 4, verse 9. Okay. All right. So the Masoretic text says, punish Israel. The Septuagint says, avenge on Israel. So pretty similar there. Not too much of a difference there. Verse 17 of that same chapter, he made obstacles to himself, which I actually would agree with like the rest of scripture where Yahuwah says, when you sin against me, you hurt yourself when you sin against me. And I think there's a scripture, I think in the book of Proverbs, that talks about he who hates his life will sin against me. Okay. So it says here, Ephraim, verse 17 here, it says, Ephraim was a partner of idols. He made obstacles to himself, meaning he put a stumbling block to himself. So what's interesting is the Masoretic here says, let him alone. So what, let him keep on that. Very weird. That's very weird. Doesn't make any sense in my opinion. Especially Yahuwah, that would not make sense according to Yahuwah's character that we see in scripture, that he would just let him keep on doing that. Rather than the Septuagint is showing that Ephraim's free will is causing him to put stumbling blocks to himself. All right, so we're going to move on here. All right, Hosea chapter 5, verse 8. Found it interesting here. I have a little note here, silver trumpet. Okay, so we're going to go to that. All right. Okay, so let's see here. Hosea 5:8, chapter 5, verse 8 here. Trump the trumpet upon the hills, sound out upon the high places, proclaim in the house of On, Benjamin is startled. Okay, so this is talking about judgment on Benjamin, which Benjamin was, part of the southern kingdom. Okay. Trumpet and Ramah. So we're gonna look at, let's see, the original Greek and Hebrew here, just to check here. I want to check something here in this verse. Let's see here. Okay. All right, so let's see. 5 verse 8. So the Greek word here for trump, meaning to blow the trumpet, is related to the silver trumpet. It's not the same exact word, but it's related to the Greek word for silver trumpet. Salpizo, G4537, to trumpet, that is sound a blast, okay? Then the next word here is the actual Greek word for the silver trumpet, salpinx, which the Hebrew would have cornet here, trumpet, shofar, curved horn. So that's a little minor difference we see there, where the Septuagint makes it more clear that it's the silver trumpet that's being commanded to be blown there. Okay. All right. Let's see here. We got chapter 6, verse, see here. We got chapter 6, verse 1 here. Masoretic text now lacks the Hebrew word Elohim there. Okay, so now we're going to go to that. Chapter 6, verse 1. Okay, Hosea chapter 6, verse 1. Okay, it says here, looking at both versions here, in their affliction they will rise early to me, saying, we should go and return to Yahuwah, our Elohim, for he snatched us away and he will make us whole. He shall strike and he shall dress our wounds, or, make whole our wounds. Okay. So we have Yahuwah here in the Masoretic, but no mention of Elohim, even though we see in the Septuagint, you have Kurios, which is the equivalent to the H3068, and then the equivalent to Elohim is in the Septuagint, Theos, the G2316. So anyway, so that was the main difference there in Hosea chapter 6, verse 1. Okay, and then we're going to go to verse 9 here. Another interesting difference here. Hosea chapter 6, verse 9 says lawlessness. Masoretic text says lewdness. Masoretic text also lacks in the house of Israel. So we're going to look at verse 9 here. Okay, just make sure we got the shared screen working here. Okay. So we're going to go down to verse 9 here. All right. And your strength as a man who is a marauder. Okay, so this is where I got to go to the Bretons here, because it's kind of confusing the way it's worded. All right, let me see. Verse 9. All right, so there the city Gilead despised me, working vanity, troubled water. Okay, so interesting. Mentions Gilead there. The Masoretic mentions troops of robbers. Wait for a man, the company of priests, murder in the way by consent, for they commit lewdness. Okay. So working vanity. Oh, I see what they did. The second half of verse 9 is verse 10 for the Septuagint. I'm sorry, guys. That kind of got confusing for a second. And your strength is that of a robber. The priests have hid the way, they have murdered the people of Sekima, for they have worked iniquity or lawlessness in the house of Israel. Okay, so that's what that's the difference there from the Masoretic. Worked lawlessness in the house of Israel. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Hosea chapter 7, verse 4. The Masoretic text lacks woolly. Okay. So woolly. Okay, so chapter 7, verse 4. And they are all adulterers as an oven heated by the baker, who ceases from raising after he has kneaded the dough until it be leavened. Okay. Okay. They are all adulterers as an until it is leavened. Okay. All right. Okay, yeah, woolly. Now where is woolly on here? Huh. I must have made a mistake. I'm sorry about that. I apologize about that, guys. Sometimes I make a mistake and mess up with the verse numberings. Okay, that's my fault. Apologize for that. Let me just fix that here. Um, okay, so we're going to go to 7 verse 10. Shall be humbled, the Septuagint says there. So we're going to go to the Septuagint and see the difference there in chapter 7 verse 10. Okay. Hosea 7:10. All right, that is down here. And the pride of Israel shall be brought down before his face, yet they have not returned to Yahuwah their Elohim, neither have they diligently sought him. So the word diligently is there, and the Masoretic doesn't have it. So that's kind of interesting. So diligently is supposed to be there. Okay, so let me see here. Okay. Now I'm wondering where I'm getting shall be humbled. I wonder if that was supposed to be verse 11. Yeah, I don't know. I have a feeling the Apostolic Bible Polyglot is screwing me up for some reason. Because in the Brens, I'm not seeing anything that's matching my bullet points here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, I get it. All right, so they're just translating it a little bit different rather than brought low, they're being humbled. Okay, that's not really a huge difference. Okay. That's more of a translation issue. Okay. But what seems to be missing actually is diligently. Okay. So I'm going to fix that little bullet point real quick. In chapter 7, verse 10, what's actually missing, and I want to correct myself here. In the Masoretic, diligently is omitted. So what I should actually put here is MT lacks the word diligently. Which you'll see a lot of that when you're testing the Masoretic and Septuagint. It's not only the book of Hosea, you'll see that. Sometimes even in the book of Psalms, you'll see the Septuagint has diligently there. Okay, so now we're going to go to chapter 7, verse 15. They were corrected by me. The Septuagint has there. Okay, chapter 7, verse 15. Okay, so let's see here. All right. They were instructed by me, as instructed, corrected, and I strengthened. So there's no mention here in the Masoretic that they were instructed or corrected by Yahuwah. I think corrected was probably translated as that with the Apostolic Bible Polyglot, if I remember correctly. So some of my notes I did by the Apostolic Bible Polyglot. I think next time to improve these studies, I'll list the exact translation I got the note from too. Yeah, corrected. See. So the Septuagint, regardless, does not have that phrase at all in the same verse. They devised wicked things. The Septuagint also mentions that they imagined mischief against me. So that could be a translator issue with the King James, the using the word mischief rather than wicked things. But I guess you could say tomato, tomato. But I just like how the Septuagint is actually making it a little bit more clear what the evil things that Yahuwah is referring to in context. Okay, so, all right, so Hosea chapter 8, verse 1. Okay, So the Masoretic text here has shofar. So seems like another difference with shofar versus probably the Greek is going to have here salpinx most likely for the silver trumpet. Okay. Okay, so where? Oh, okay. So the Septuagint actually doesn't have it doesn't even mention the trumpet or anything here, but the Masoretic text does. So the Septuagint is actually lacking the Greek equivalent for cornet or trumpet here. So that's kind of interesting. So this whole phrase here, the Septuagint doesn't have set the trumpet to your mouth. It's not there in the Septuagint. So one positive. Finally, one positive for the Masoretic version of Hosea here. There hasn't been many, to be honest, so far. Okay, let's see here. Hosea chapter 8, verse 6. Masoretic text has broken in pieces. So now we're going to look at verse 6. Okay. Let's see. Chapter 8, verse 6. Okay. Let's see here. Let me just, for simplicity, I'm going to use Brighton here. All right. Let's see here. Okay. Whereas the workman made it, and it is not Elohim. This is referring to idols, graven images. Wherefore your calf, Samaria, was a deceiver. Interesting. Was a deceiver versus broken, shall be broken in pieces. That's interesting. Wow. So that's a little bit of different wording there. It's the Masoretic is mentioned being broken in pieces, but the Septuagint mentions that they were deceived by their idol. So that's kind of interesting. So, but to the Masoretic text credit, it does talk about being broken in pieces, which the Septuagint for some reason lacks. But anyway, so on to the next one here. All right, so chapter 8, verse 7. Their destruction shall await them. That's what the Septuagint says here, the LXX. Okay, so we're going to look at both versions of that verse real quick here. Okay, so Hosea 8:7. Okay, for they sowed blighted seed, and their destruction shall await them, a sheaf of grain. Yes, so their destruction shall await them is right here. And we see nothing mentioning their destruction in the Masoretic. I mean, so that's very interesting there. So, all right. Now, verse 9. Okay. So the LXX lacks a wild donkey alone by himself. Okay. So verse 9. For they are gone up to Assyria, a wild donkey alone by himself. Okay. So interesting. Okay, I see why I thought there was a huge difference. Okay, that's my bad. I misread this verse from the Septuagint. So the Septuagint, instead of saying wild donkey, it seems like they're translating wild. No, hold on. Yeah, the Septuagint, instead of wild donkey, put Ephraim there. Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah, Ephraim has been gone up to the Assyrians, has been strengthened against himself. Ephraim has hired lovers. They loved gifts versus hired lovers. So yeah, that's technically a difference too. A little bit of difference in wording. Yeah, that's very possible. Yeah, Brother Joshua has a good point there in the chat that the phrase be the whirlwind phrase could actually be referring to the same thing as the Septuagint. So yeah, that's very possible. That actually makes sense. Um, so let's see here. Verse 10. So we're moving on here. Verse 10 says, "Therefore shall they be delivered to the nations." So it's talking about them being dispersed, because of their wickedness, because of their sin. Okay, so now we're going to go to verse 10 in chapter 8. All right. "Therefore shall they be delivered to the nations." Uh, so what's weird is the Masoretic is trying to say that they hired the nations for themselves. So wow, that's a complete different paradigm, where Yahuwah is actually dispersing them among the nations, delivering them to the Gentiles. Masoretic's trying to say that they've hired the Gentiles, which makes no sense in the context at all of the narrative of Hosea here. So definitely siding with the Septuagint in that verse, in verse 9. Oh, no, not verse 9, verse 10, I mean. Okay, so Ephraim statutes are strange things. Oh, yeah, this is an interesting verse. I think a lot of us remember this cross reference here. Um, it talks about Ephraim's statutes are strange things versus the Masoretic, saying that Ephraim counted Yahuwah's laws as strange things. Okay, so here we go. Here it says, "I have written to him great things of my law. They were counted as a strange thing." And I'm not saying that that's not correct. I'm just saying that I find it interesting that the Septuagint has a little worded a little differently. It says, "I will write down." So now you have like past versus future tense. It's kind of interesting. "A multitude of commands for him, but his statutes are accounted strange things. Even the beloved altars." Interesting. Beloved altars is not mentioned, and this is hinting to Ephraim making statutes for himself, the idolatry that we see historically throughout the prophets. So anyway, thought that was an interesting difference there in verse 12. We're moving on. Okay, so, all right. And we see here in verse 13 here, Masoretic text lacks "eat unclean things among the Assyrians." Find that interesting. Uh, Extra detail that the Septuagint has about what's going to happen to Ephraim when the house of Israel is dispersed among all the Gentiles. So, or at the minimum, when he's dispersed in Assyria. So I find that really interesting. So we're going to look at verse 13 here. "For if they should offer a sacrifice and eat flesh, Yahuwah will not accept them. Now will he remember their lawlessnesses and will take vengeance on their sins. And they have returned to Egypt, and they shall eat unclean things among the Assyrians." So what's interesting is the return back to Egypt is almost in the same statement. I could be reading this wrong, but it's like almost in the same statement, same thought of this verse. The idea of them going back to Egypt, it's also mentioning they're going to eat unclean things among Assyrians. So that's kind of interesting. Anyway, but that was Hosea 8:13 in the Masoretic versus Septuagint. So the Masoretic leaves out that Yahuwah will cause them to eat unclean things among the Assyrians. So that's interesting. Which, would be like a punishment, just to be clear about. So we're not getting confused about Yahuwah's character. He would cause them to eat unclean things as a punishment for what they've done, because they've sinned against him time after time after time. Hosea chapter 9, verse 7. The LXX says vengeance. Masoretic text says visitation. And I mean, you could say visitation could be hinting vengeance, but visitation can also be a good thing, so technically, depending on the context. is the way you would interpret visitation, so anyway, so I just wanted to show that the Septuagint's a little bit clearer about what type of visitation is happening here. It says here in Hosea 9:7, the Septuagint, the days of vengeance are come. The days of your repayment are come. And Yasharal shall be afflicted as the prophet that is mad, like as a mad prophet, crazy person. As a man deranged by reason of the multitude of your lawlessnesses, your madness has abounded. Interesting. It's pretty interesting there. All right. Moving on here. Okay, we got something here. It says Septuagint lacks the lyre. So the instrument, the lyre, is not mentioned here, which is interesting. So, all right, let's see here. Give them, O Yahuwah, what you will give them. A miscarrying womb and dry breasts. Wow. Okay. Okay. What was supposed to be missing there? Let's see here. That is weird. Lear. The Lear's not mentioned in either one. I think I messed up on that one. Must have made a typo or error or something. All right, so we're just going to move on there because I didn't see Lear in either version, actually. Hosea chapter 10, verse 1. Septuagint lacks goodly. All right, so we're going to go to Hosea chapter 10, verse 1. Please let me know if the shared screen, the parallel is not coming on the shared screen. I know sometimes the stupid shared screen glitches out sometimes. All right, so Hosea 10, verse 1. Yasharal is a vine with tubely, goodly branches. Her fruit is abundant according to the multitude of her fruits. She has multiplied her altars according to the wealth of his land. He has set up pillars. Okay, pillars, images, kind of the same thing, groves. Okay. All right, so it's just interesting that it says goodly branches versus empty vine in the Masoretic, which I find kind of interesting. So there's a difference there. Now, depending on the context is where I would, which one I would side with. If the context is about Yahuwah destroying Yasharal because of their sin and punishing them because of their sin, empty vine would make a lot more sense. But if it's talking about bad fruit, then I can see why they talk about abundance of Israel's fruit. So it also depends on what type of fruit is being mentioned here, whether good or bad. So let's see here. Chapter 10, verse 5. Masoretic lacks and as they provoked him. So that's very important phrase to lack, in my opinion. So they provoked him is a really important phrase, especially for context. Why we see this constant narrative of Yahuwah punishing his people, saying, "You're not my people. You are not beloved. You shall not be given mercy." It's really important with the context to have a phrase like that in chapter 10, verse 5. They have provoked Yahuwah. They have provoked him to jealousy. Okay, so we're going to go to Hosea 10, verse 5. All right. Hosea 10, verse 5. All right. Says, the inhabitants of Samaria shall dwell near the calf of the house of On, For the people of it mourned for it. So mourning for a calf, I guess. Yeah, so possibly Tammuz worship being hinted at here. A golden calf, maybe the sin of Jeroboam maybe be hinted at here. And as they provoked him, meaning as they provoked Yahuwah. So this phrase again seems to not be mentioned at all in this verse from the Masoretic. So obviously in context it's talking about provoking Yahuwah to jealousy with the idols, with a calf, a graven image. Okay. All right. So we're moving forward here to verse 6. Now we're going to look at verse 6. LXX has gift. Masoretic text has shame. That's interesting. Difference. Huge difference in terminology there. So, all right. So we're going to go to chapter 10, verse 6. All right, chapter 10, verse 6 here. Okay. All right. And having bound it for the Assyrians, they carried it away as presents to King Yarim. And Yarib, Ephraim shall receive a gift, and Yasharal shall be ashamed of his counsel. Oh, okay. So this is interesting. So the King James actually uses the same term here, present. That's interesting. Interesting. Yeah, so actually there's no difference there. I have to correct myself there too. That's my fault again. I must have been using to test against the Septuagint some weird translation of the Masoretic that made an error there, because shame is not even there. So that's my fault again. My bad about that. All right, here we go. Verse 9. Septuagint lacks Gibeah. Okay, so now we're going to verse 9 here. Septuagint lacks Gibeah. Go verse 9 here. All right. From the time the hills existed, Yasharal has sinned. There they stood war waged against the children of lawlessness. Okay, so we have children of lawlessness being mentioned. From the beginning, Yasharal has sinned. So that's kind of interesting that this phrase is not mentioned in the Masoretic there at all. But the Septuagint is also missing something. It's missing the phrase Gibeah here. Battle in Gibeah against the children of lawlessness did not overtake them. So the battle in Gibeah, for some reason, is lacking the Septuagint there. Okay. All right. So let's see here. Hosea 10:10. Oh, I see. Actually, that's not a difference. It's just that the Septuagint is one verse ahead of the Masoretic there. Shall not overtake them is actually part of verse 9 of the Masoretic, so that's not really a difference. Okay. Here we go here. Hosea chapter 10, verse 12. Fruit of life, Masoretic text, mercy. So we're going to look at chapter 10, verse 12 here, which okay. All right. Let me see here. Chapter 10, verse 6. Brother Joshua just was helping me out here, telling me to make sure that that verse 6 is the same before moving forward. Okay, so bounded for the Assyrians, carried away presents. Okay, so in the Hebrew, gift, oblation, offering, presents, voluntary, bloody, bloodless, tribute. Yeah. So yeah, it doesn't look like there's a difference there. Could be. Let me see something really quick. Let me just check that.
Keep reading further. The difference is further in.
Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you. Let's see here. Yeah. Shall be ashamed. Oh, here's the word shame. Duh. All right. Thanks, brother. All right. So the Hebrew word for shame here is bosna, shame, shamefulness, feminine form of H954. And obvious. So actually, let's see here. So receive a gift in the Septuagint versus receive shame, which depending on the context, I guess, would be which version I would lean on of this verse. If it's talking about receiving gifts, like being partial, the Septuagint would make more sense. But if it's talking about Yahuwah striking down Israel for its wickedness, then I would go with the Masoretic. So that's all I can say about that verse. But there is a huge difference there. There's receiving gift versus receiving shame. So thank you, brother Joshua, for telling me to go back there. That was really important. And so let's see here. All right, so all right, provoked him. We got that. All right, verse 9. Let's see here. Lax Gibeah. Yep, that's true. Lax. So now we're going to go to chapter 10, verse 9, where the Masoretic has Gibeah. I think we actually already did this one, actually. But let me just double check. I'm pretty sure we just showed this difference, but just to make sure. From the time, yeah, so from the times the hill has existed, that's what the Masoretic is missing. Basically meaning from time that Yahuwah made Yasharal a nation, they have sinned. Meaning they never truly really followed him from the whole time, which actually goes along with a lot of other verses from the Tanakh. Wage war against the children of lawlessness, and then here's the part that the Septuagint is missing here: battle in Gibeah against the children of lawlessness and not overtake them. Now it seems like the not overtake them part might be part of verse 10, actually, chapter 10, verse 10 of the Septuagint. To chastise them shall not overtake them on the hill, unless that's a different thought there. Let me see here. No, that does look like it. So sometimes it's going to get confusing when you're looking at the differences, because sometimes one version has a verse ahead of one another, if that makes any sense. So sometimes you got to be careful. I've messed up a couple of times doing these types of studies, trying to pre-prepare them. All right, so we're going to jump ahead now and go to verse 12. Fruit of life, Septuagint, Masoretic text, mercy. Excuse me, sorry about that. So chapter 10, verse 12. All right, we're going to go to sow to yourselves for righteousness. Okay, same there. Gather in for the fruit of life. Reap in mercy. Break up your fellow ground, for it is time to seek Yahuwah till the fruits of righteousness come upon you. Till he comes and rains righteousness upon you. I mean, it's very minor difference there. I mean, but there is a difference. Fruit of life, I honestly prefer that in the context of this verse, just because it's a little bit more specific than just mercy. It's showing what type of mercy he's talking about. Fruit of the spirit and stuff like that. You could even say, okay, and what mercy to Yahuwah is referring to, rather than what we've learned, favor, mercy is from our, traditional being raised in Christianity and all that. All right, so Hosea chapter 10, verse 14. All right, LXX has Solomon, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so let's see here. Hosea 10:14. Drop down here. Therefore shall tumult arise among your people, and all your fortresses shall be spoiled as Sharman spoiled Betharbel. So Shalman, no, what's interesting is this Shalman, which is a king of Assyria, but we have the Septuagint mentioning as a prince, Solomon departed out of the house of Jeroboam. In the days of battle, they dashed the mother to the ground upon the children. So to really figure out which one would make more context, we would definitely have to go back to Second Chronicles and stuff like that. I'm more leaning to the Septuagint version of that, of this verse. I think it makes a little bit more sense to me, in my opinion, what it's talking about. All right, so Hosea chapter 10, verse 15, which seems to be, let's see, 11, verse 1. So the Septuagint says here early. So the phrase early. So we're going to look at that now. All right, so 10, verse 15. So shall Bethel do to you because of your great wickedness. In the morning shall the king of Yasharal utterly be cut off. Let's see here. Early in the morning were they cast off. The king of Yasharal has been cast off, for Yasharal is a child, and I loved him, and out of Egypt I have called his children. Okay, so from what it seems like the end of 10, verse 15 of the Masoretic is actually the beginning of 11, verse 1, I believe, here in Hosea. So the phrase early in the morning is missing in the Masoretic. So that's like a little interesting difference there. So let me see here. Now we're up to 11, verse 2 here. Okay, so my presence says here. Okay, so Hosea 11, verse 2. Septuagint says my presence. Okay. So they called them, so they went off from them. Septuagint says, as I called them, so they departed from my presence. So this gives allude to Yasharal's, Israel's wickedness. They departed from being in Yahuwah's presence. They sacrificed Balaam. Okay, so in the context of what Hosea is talking about, Septuagint definitely having that phrase there, they departed from my presence, makes a lot of sense. The Masoretic lacking that kind of takes away from the context and doesn't make it as clear, in my opinion. All right, so Hosea 11:4 here, we have Masoretic text lacks when men were destroyed. Okay. Hosea 11:4. All right. Yep. Bretons, when men were destroyed. Versus Masoretic saying, I drew them with cords of a man. I don't know. That's very weird wording there. And it could be the King James. I know that sometimes the older Bibles, sometimes they screw up the meaning of certain words, but the Septuagint definitely makes more sense when men were destroyed. So if the King James is translating it honestly in that verse, then there's something missing in the Masoretic, as you can see there, when men were destroyed in verse 4 there. So now we're going to go to verse 6. Okay. Let's see. Chapter 11, verse 6. They shall eat the fruit of their own devices. Now, this makes a lot of sense with what we've been reading about so far from Hosea. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go down to verse 6 of this chapter. It says here, and the sword shall abide on his cities and shall consume his branches and shall devour them because of their own counsels. Okay. So let's see here. Whoops. Okay. But it says here in the Septuagint, it says, He ceased to war with his hands, and they shall eat of the fruit of their own devices, meaning they shall be destroyed by their own wickedness, their own wicked deeds, which I kind of like the wording a little bit better there from the Septuagint. Okay, so, all right. So we're going to move on here, verse 7, Hosea 11:7. Septuagint says, Elohim shall be angry with his precious things, which again makes sense with the context we're reading about. Okay, it's talking about Yahuwah being angry with his people. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 11, verse 7. My people are bent to backsliding from me, though they called them to the Most High. None at all would exalt him. Okay, so let's see here. And his people, so the Septuagint says, and his people shall cleave fondly to their habitation, but Elohim shall be angry with his precious things. So this phrase here is not mentioned at all in the Masoretic version, which actually gives us a little bit more context here, which I really like from the Septuagint there. Okay, so anyway, all right. Okay, so angry with his precious things. Okay, so now we're going to chapter 11, verse 12 here. The Septuagint lacks Judah rules with Elohim. Oh, yeah, this is a huge difference here. And I remember looking at this when I was putting this study together. Chapter 11, verse 12. Masoretic text makes Judah look like, you know, they're not as bad as Ephraim, or they're righteous, they're ruling with Yahuwah. So very interesting. Let's see here. Ephraim surrounds me about with lies, and the house of Yasharal with deceit. But Judah, Yehuda, yet rules with Elohim and is trustworthy with the set apart ones. Now, if we look at the Septuagint version, it says, the house of Yasharal and Yehuda with wickedness, which goes along with the book of Jeremiah, that she did not learn from her treacherous sister. Okay. Oh no, my bad. I'm paraphrasing wrong. No, the book of Jeremiah though would actually agree with the Septuagint version in this verse that Judah did not learn from her sister Ephraim and became just as wicked or even more wicked. Yehuda with wickedness, but now Elohim knows them, and they shall be called Elohim set apart people. Wow, that makes a lot more sense. So this is showing like a prophetic. The Septuagint version is showing that prophetically Yahuwah is eventually going to have mercy on them, on both houses, and both of them are going to be called his people in the future. So yeah, I definitely like the Septuagint version a lot better. It makes a lot more sense. Let's see here. Okay, so now we're going to look at chapter 12, verse 1 here from the Septuagint. Ephraim is being called an evil spirit, which is kind of interesting. So we're seeing, Yahuwah is still very angry, and his displeasure is still burning against the house of Israel at this point. Okay. Let's see. So 12, verse 1, in the Masoretic says, Ephraim feeds on the wind. Septuagint says, but Ephraim is an evil spirit. He has chased the east wind all the day. He has multiplied empty and vain things. So in the context of this verse, I would definitely take the Septuagint over the Masoretic, feeding on the wind. And like I said before, sometimes it could be the King James and these British English translators. They translate into a very weird old English we're not familiar with. Feeding on the wind, that's a very weird phrase. So anyway, I definitely like the Brenton's English Septuagint for that verse. Makes a lot more sense. Okay, so now we're going to go to chapter 12, verse 4 here. All right, so it says you have the Septuagint saying with Masoretic text over, and minor difference there. All right, so let's go on to verse 5 here. The Septuagint says Almighty, lacks actually the tetragrammaton, so this is a point against the Septuagint here. And the Masoretic text says of armies. So sometimes you'll see in the Greek, they'll have the word for almighty, you know, like the almighty. And then this in this Masoretic text Hebrew, it will have Sabaoth, which is of armies, or which is a more correct translation of Sabaoth than hosts. It's actually referring to army, like the angelic armies of heaven. So anyway, but unfortunately, the Septuagint is lacking the tetragrammaton here, unfortunately. So I'll just show you that. So you know I don't have a bias here. I'm going to show you guys proof of that. Hosea 12:5. All right, so Hosea chapter 12, verse 5 here. Okay. Even Yahuwah, see, H3068. Oh, my bad. Actually, hold on a second. I could have messed up there. What I want to do is double check, because sometimes the Apostolic Bible Polyglot screws up and I have to go to a regular Greek OT with the Strongs to make sure that it's not there. Yeah, because sometimes the ABP plus is like catered to the Masoretic. Yeah, I messed up. Okay. Oh, hold on. Oh, I see where it's not there. Okay. All right, so the first part of the verse, you have it matching the Masoretic. Okay. The Almighty is being used for of armies. Now, the second part of the verse, for some reason, there's not an H3068. So, okay. So the last part of the verse is what a tetragrammaton, according to the Masoretic text, should be twice in this verse. The Septuagint only has it once in the beginning of the verse, but is missing it at the end of the verse, if that makes any sense. So as we can see here, it's not there. It just has Almighty. Okay. So anyway, that's a weird difference there. One of the rare occasions where the Masoretic has the tetragrammaton and the Septuagint doesn't. That's a very rare occurrence that I've noticed in my own studies of that happening. Okay, so let's see here. Chapter 12, verse 7, we have Hosea, Masoretic text, lacks Canaan. So this is a very interesting difference here in chapter 12, verse 7. Canaan, right here. Okay, so, you know, the person Canaan, or, you know, this could be prophetically talking about the Canaanites even. Okay, the descendants of Canaan. Okay, tyrannized, to tyrannize, he loved to tyrannize. So love. So that actually makes more sense. The fact that Canaan's actually mentioned by name here, this makes a lot of sense, because we see these descendants of Canaan, even Canaan himself, being wicked in the Tanakh in Genesis. You know, and his descendants would be like tyrants, like bullies, you know, in multiple ways, you know, those tribes that descended from Canaan, you know. So very interesting. The Masoretic leaves that name out. Very interesting. I don't know. It's almost like they're trying to hide something. All right, so let's see. I was represented. So we're going to go to chapter 12, verse 10 here. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to drop this down correctly here. All right, so I was represented. So we're going to go to verse 10 here. All right. All right. Sorry, guys. All right. So hold on a second. So we're going to go to verse 10 here. I have also spoken by the prophets. Okay. And I will speak by the prophets. And let's see, I hate it when it does that backwards thing. Sometimes it's hard to read the EBP plus because they do it in a backwards order. It's almost like they're trying to make the verse like be in Hebrew order or something. You know, the right to left thing. And I will speak to the prophets, and I have multiplied visions. And by the means of the prophets, I was represented. So the phrase "I was represented" is not there in the Masoretic for whatever reason. Very strange there, because that actually makes a lot of sense. That goes along with the rest of the Tanakh there. The prophets represented Yahuwah. They were a representative of him, a mouthpiece for the Almighty. So that actually makes perfect sense for it to be there. So now we're going to look at verse 11 here. Septuagint has the word false there. So let's see what the context of that is. All right. So let's see here the word false in verse 11. Okay. All right. Let's see here. If Gilead exists not, then the chiefs in Gilead, when they sacrificed, were false. So the chiefs were false. The leaders in Gilead were false. That's interesting to leave that out. Very interesting. All right, so now we're looking at verse 12 here. Septuagint lacks he kept. Okay, so we're going to see the context. What's the context of that? All right, so I believe that's verse 12 there. Yeah. So for a wife he kept is the Masoretic version, and waited for a wife. Okay, not that big of a difference. Okay. Yeah, that's not that big of a difference. All right. It's just a little different wording there. Okay. All right. So Septuagint in chapter 12, verse 14 here says excited. Masoretic text has bitter. Okay, so now we're going to go to verse 14 here. All right, so let's go to verse 14. Angry and excited, provoked to anger the most bitterly. Now, if this is talking about provoking Yahuwah, it would make more sense that bitter should be there. But the Septuagint is talking about a completely different context. It's talking about Ephraim, that Ephraim was angry and excited, therefore his blood shall be poured out upon him, and Yahuwah shall repay to him his reproach. Interesting. So just seems like a completely different context there. So, all right. So we're going to go to the next verse there. And like I said, some of these differences really depend on the context of the verse. That's all I can say. Which one is more accurate? All right, so chapter 13, verse 1. So it says, Ephraim adopted ordinances for himself. Masoretic, I think, says establish. So not much of a difference there, but according to the word of Ephraim, he adopted ordinances for himself. All right. Second. Sorry about that, guys. All right. According to the word of Ephraim, he adopted ordinances for himself. All right. Okay. So he exalted himself. All right. Okay. Hold on, guys. All right. Sorry about that tonight, guys. My stupid mouse is being really stupid right now. All right. All right. So let's go to verse 2. Masoretic text has kissed the calves. Septuagint says come to an end. So that's a weird difference in phrasing there. All right, here, let's see here. It says, kiss the calves. And now they sin more and more and more and have made them molten images of their silver, idols according to their own understanding, all of it the work of the craftsmen. They say of them, let the men that sacrifice kiss the calves. So weird. Septuagint says, they say sacrifice men, for the calves have come to an end. Wow, human sacrifice, interesting. So the Septuagint is hinting that they're getting so wicked that they're actually sacrificing men, which is very plausible historically that could have been happening when Yasharel got so wicked. I mean, they were sacrificing children, we definitely know. So I would not be surprised. All right, so Masoretic text in chapter 13, verse 4 has a whole phrase missing here that establishes the heaven and creates the earth, whose hands have framed the whole army of heaven, but I showed them not to you that you should go after them. Now, for some reason, the Masoretic decides, oh yeah, we're going to just take this whole phrase out. Very interesting. So, yeah. So I am Yahuwah your Elohim that establishes the heavens. So here we go. We got right here. This whole phrase is missing in the Masoretic. That establishes the heavens. Whoops. And creates the earth, whose hands have framed the whole heaven. But I showed them not to you, that you should go after them. So interesting. Very, very interesting. I wonder if the Masorites were into a little Kabbalah there and probably astrology, and they probably took that out on purpose. I don't know. More of a theory, but I find it very interesting that part would be taken out. Anyway, Hosea chapter 13, verse 5. Tended you as a shepherd, which this would connect with so many scriptures here in context. So Hosea 13:5 is referring to Yahuwah tending to his people as a shepherd. All right, so I tended you as a shepherd. So the Masoretic says, I did know you in the wilderness. Very weird difference there. I mean, obviously we know Yahuwah knew them in the wilderness, but I find it very strange that they don't have, that the Septuagint lets you know that he tended them as a shepherd in the wilderness, which makes sense. It makes complete sense. Yahuwah was teaching them his laws. He was leading them. They are the sheep of his pasture. I mean, we can go to tons of verses where that would, the rest of scripture would agree with the Septuagint version there. All right, so we're getting close to the end of this study here. Okay, so Hosea 13:7. Septuagint says panther, Masoretic text says lion. I mean, it's it's a very minor difference, but a difference nonetheless. There are two different types of felines, but so lion here, and we're going to look at the Hebrew here, shakav, from unused root, probably meaning to roar a lion from his characteristic roar, fierce lion. And just for the heck of it, let's go with the EBP plus and see what the original word for the Greek of verse 7 is supposed to be. Let's see here. Okay. Panther. Paniguris, a derivative of a mass meeting that is figurative, universal, companionship, general assembly. Okay, that is really weird. So that opens a whole nother can of worms there, that the Greek is not even showing that it's an animal, according to that. Let me just look up see here. Okay, now what's weird here is the word leopard is pardalis. Is that related to this other word? No, okay, so it's different. So the actual word for a panther, a leopard, is actually the second Greek word here. A leopard, panther, a leopard. So yeah, definitely a translation issue there. So according to the Strongs, this should actually say General Assembly. So man, that throws a whole monkey wrench there. So even though it still remains a difference, but just to be honest, I'm gonna put General Assembly here and fix that. Wow. That's why you gotta test these English translators. I'm telling you. All right. Okay, so we're moving down to verse 9 here, which says your destruction. So Hosea 13:9. So Hosea 13:9. All right. So we're gonna look at that. Now we're gonna go back to the parallel here. Hosea 13:9. In your corruption, O Israel, who will help? So what's interesting is the Masoretic doesn't mention Yasharel's sin or their corruption, or their state of being a reprobate at this point. It just says you have destroyed yourself. I mean, you can make the argument destroying themselves would be corruption. I mean, I guess you could roughly say they're saying the same thing, but I agree. I actually like that the Septuagint is stating literally that they're in corruption, that they're spiritually corrupt, that they're wicked. You know, it's showing a decent bit of context there. Um, let's see here. Now I wonder why I put your destruction. Let me see here. I think I might have been using probably the Bretons translates corruption as destruction, is what I'm assuming. Your lawlessness has destroyed you. Okay, yeah. Yeah, destruction, corruption. Okay. Almost the same thing. Okay. All right. Let's see here. We're gonna move on here. Hosea 13:10. Where is your king? Interesting. Yahuwah is proposing a question to them. Where is your king? Kind of like relating back to the fact that they wanted their own king. They didn't want Yahuwah to be their king. Okay. I am. Where is your king now that should help you in all your cities? Yeah. So Yahuwah is relating back to Deuteronomy where they wanted their own king, and Yahuwah even said to them, "You shall not have power to put a heathen ruler over you." So I will be your king. So that's interesting. The Masoretic is saying, "I will be your king." Septuagint is having more or less where Yahuwah is asking, "Where is their king? Where is their king that they wanted so much?" So I don't know. I would have to agree with the Septuagint in this particular context historically, where at that moment he's still angry at them. His displeasure is still burning against them. Uh, okay, so Masoretic text. Chapter 13, verse 14 of Hosea, the Masoretic text adds, "I will be your plagues," which is interesting. So we're going to look at the context of that, whether that makes sense or not. Verse 15. Okay. Oh, no, verse 14. My bad. My bad about that. So verse 14. Okay. I will redeem them from the power of the grave. Wow. Okay. This screams out Yahusha here. Um, you know, Yahusha defeated death. Okay. And deliver them from death. O death, I will be your death. O Sheol, I will be. Oh, whoops, my bad. I'm like reading. I'm reading the bishop's Bible. My bad about that. That's my bad. All right, so let me see here. Okay. Let me just make sure I get, let's see, so verse 14 here. Okay. So verse 14, I will deliver them out of the power of Sheol and will redeem them from death. Where is your penalty, O death? O Sheol, where is your sting? Comfort is hidden from my eyes. So in this context, it doesn't make sense that Yahuwah would be their destruction. He's supposed to be redeeming them. I mean, this is supposed to be pointing to the Brit Hadashah here. And the Masoretic text adds, I will be your destruction. Repentance shall be hidden from my eyes. Very strange. I mean, that added phrase is changing Yahuwah's character, I would think. That is very off. So anyway, okay, so yeah, so more accurately, the Masoretic text is adding here, I will be your destruction, which is very weird. Very weird. Anyway, so Hosea chapter 13, verse 15, the LXX says east wind here. So we're going to look at verse 15 real quickly. Though he be fruitful among his brothers, an east wind. Okay, so actually the King James and the Brents here both use east wind. Let me just see here if wonder if that's correct for the Masoretic or Septuagint improvise, not the Septuagint, the King James improvised there. Let's see here. East wind. Okay, the Hebrew there is, what is this? East wind, yeah. Okay. Kadim, brevity, the east wind. Okay, yeah. So interestingly enough, they actually agree with one another there. So that's not really a difference. I'm going to have to get rid of verse 15. That's actually a verse they actually have in common. Okay. All right. So now one last thing, and this is unfortunately, this is a negative here for our modern copy of the Septuagint today, which is known as the source we have for the Septuagint today. It's not the original Septuagint, it's the Codex Vaticanus. So unfortunately, this version of the Septuagint, which Brenton used, does not have Hosea 14 verse 9, but is Hosea 14:9 is actually in the Masoretic. So that's the last difference for tonight. So in that case, I would definitely use the Masoretic as a reference, just because there's certain verses that have been omitted in our modern copy of a copy of a copy of the Septuagint. Okay, so let me just see here. Hold on. Isn't it omitted? Hold on, where? Let me see here. Let me just double check here because I might have messed up. It might actually be here. Okay. Who is wise and understand these things, or prudent will know them. For the ways of you who are straight, and the righteous shall walk in them, but the wicked shall fall therein. Okay, so it's actually there. Interesting. That's strange. Wow. I guess I made a mistake there. Okay. All right. Well, that's actually a relief on my part. So the verse Hosea chapter 14 verse 10 is actually in both the Masoretic and the Septuagint according to what eSword is showing me. So anyway, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us for the study tonight. And I apologize for the errors that I had to correct while doing this study. Usually I don't have to do that many changes to the Google Doc. I apologize for those mistakes I made when preparing this study, but my prayer would be that this study would be an edification for all those that were watching, listening in, that were following along. So thank you for stopping in, and thank you for watching and listening to our Sabbath evening study. I pray that this was a baraka for you, and that you got something out of this, and maybe this is a way to kind of maybe sow a seed of interest to test different versions of the scriptures, especially the Tanakh. And so thank you for stopping by to all of our brothers and sisters. Have a great rest of your Sabbath evening. Shabbat shalom. Shalom. Hey, Brother Jeff, Sister Zakaya, shalom.